Take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
Next up is Britt.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Chairman. As the Senate overwhelmingly voted yes.
You can call me Mr. Chairman if you want.
Well, I cannot be compelled to use your preferred pronouns as you have all voted.
Wait a minute. We're talking about preferred pronouns. A lot of people are. I prefer to be called Chairman French. That's my preferred pronoun.
I know, and you all voted that preferred pronouns cannot be compelled speech in SF 77. Anyway, my name is Britt Borrell.
Yo, I saw this. That shit was badass, dude. I definitely think people should start doing that en masse. That's a pretty specific case. I think she's talking about state law there because that whole thing about compelled speech is a very specific, like, instance. You know, I don't think that all the anti-LGBTQ laws nationwide use that specific language. But what's interesting about the compelled speech angle is that's exactly what Jordan Peterson was saying in Canada. He was using the same compelled speech argument that, saying I have to use someone's pronouns as a teacher is compelled speech, which is evil and bad, and that's communism. And that was the claim that pretty much launched his whole career. So it's interesting that there's a place in the States that is now using that language all these years later. But he definitely made a big impact with that whole compelled speech thing. Have you seen Hunter Schafer's video that she made about how her passport was changed? I was going to do a video about that because she does like an 8-minute long video about how she now has to have an M on her passport. And it made me think of Dave Chappelle's special about trans people. Funny enough. But here, let me send you this link.
Hello, Internet. I don't really post much these days, but I had a bit of a harsh reality check today and felt like it's important to share with whoever is listening. So I'm sure most of us remember on, I think, the first day of Trump's presidency, he signed an executive order to declare only 2 genders recognized by the state, male and female, assigned at birth. As a result of this, which I wrote down because I want to get it right, the Bureau of Consular Affairs has frozen passport applications requesting a gender marker change or renewals or new applications with a gender marker differing from an applicant's gender assigned at birth. So my initial reaction to this, because our president, is a lot of talk, was like, I'll believe it when I see it. And today, I saw it on my new passport, male. So, now to specify, my gender markers were first changed in my teens when I first got my driver's license, and then passports following. All have been female since then. Hasn't really been a problem.
Yeah, I've seen that video actually. Pretty nuts story in general, but now that you mention it, I can see what you're saying about it reminding you about Chappelle's story. But that was one of the first examples of someone actually getting burned by this new stuff. And yeah, that is a very specific case. But I just think that kind of attitude in general and those tactics, just basically using their own shit against them. The Republicans have put themselves in such a unique place in history of voting in all this shit that's against most of us. At least it would work against the non-rich people, most tactics. But that, just pointing out and using this stuff against him is going to be pretty easy in a variety of ways. And I think it's the only thing that's going to make him wake up to it. I doubt they'll admit it, or most of them will, but it is what it is.
The reason it reminded me of the Dave Chappelle special is because, his whole point that he was making in that special, the big one that was about trans people, when he put out like a whole hour-long special that was only about trans people, the big point that he was making is that he felt like it was too much like pageantry and like basically white trans women were being put in the sort of front of the oppression Olympics. I hate to use that phrase, but that was kind of the point that he was making. Like, black people have been oppressed in this country for all these years, and then I guess in his opinion, the trans issue was like a new thing, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about trans rights, and you got Caitlyn Jenner on the front of magazines and blah blah blah. And he was saying that he feels black people are being told they have to respect the oppressed experience of these people, despite the fact that they have the monopoly on oppression in America, I guess. I mean, that was kind of his point as I remember it. And it feels even weaker now than it did when I first heard him making that point. But it just strikes me now that like the only reason we have somebody like Hunter Schafer to tell us about what's happening because of this and be loudly visible on behalf of trans people is because of that push to make them visible. You know what I mean? Like that exact thing that he was complaining about is the only reason that trans people have any representation at all, because their whole thing has been ripped away from them. You know what I mean? Any progress that we made, at least in terms of the federal government and trans people, has been erased, or at least is being threatened to be erased within the course of a month. And the only reason that people are aware of somebody like Hunter Schafer and able to follow her is because people like that were given a platform over the last few years. And so I don't know, it just shows how empty reactionary rhetoric is. You know what I mean? He was like torturing himself to try to find a way that trans representation was a bad thing and somehow bad for black people. And I remember at the time it fell super flat, where I was like, man, that's a horrible reason to be doing all this. But it really just occurs to me that like this is where we're at now, and we're lucky that we have people like Hunter Schafer now to talk about the trans experience as it's being like assaulted, and I don't know, I just wonder if there's going to be any self-reflection from some of the transphobes of the world. Probably not Dave Chappelle, but I have heard from a few people, as particularly comedians, that like, they're starting to realize, oh, maybe this has gone a little bit far. In complaining about wokeness and trans people, I wasn't really advocating for all of their rights to be taken away. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what the fuck you get for siding with reactionaries.
Yeah, I remember that special, and her video definitely reminded me of the whole initial introduction to Jordan Peterson I had. The thing with Dave Chappelle's stance on that, I get coming from a place of being from a group of people that have been like ridiculously oppressed, and then coming up in a place where at a time things are supposed to be getting better, but then you see how much they really aren't that much better, and then kind of have like that whole late 90s early 2000s racism is over thing, was completely asinine, and it hit Dave Chappelle really wrong, obviously. And so I could see being upset over that, but then to try and like take the stance that trans people were trying to take the spotlight or whatever is just ridiculously tone deaf. And my feelings on Dave Chappelle. I think we're pretty much in the same boat on that. It's very disappointing how he's become.
I wonder what other ways there are to use their policies against them, or I guess use the stupidness of their policies against them. A lot of these laws, even the ones that are happening on the federal level, these executive orders, they're very stupidly written, hastily written by ChatGPT and that sort of thing. So I guess that does leave opportunities open for subterfuge within, you know what I mean, these laws, because they do things like try to mandate that there are only two sexes from conception, which is like completely nonsense scientifically, and they're getting absolutely whooped in the federal courts over that. Or, you know, can't use anyone's pronouns because of compelled speech. And so that means that you don't use, you know, the chairman's preferred pronouns, stuff like that. I do wonder what other tactics there are like that. Because at very least, what it would do is it would gum up the works and it would create the basis for lawsuits that could, you know, end up actually challenging some of these terrible laws in the courts somewhere.
As far as like what we can do that's like that, I don't know. There's not as many opportunities, but a lot of what I've been doing is just pointing out specific things that are going to directly affect them, like the cost of prescription drugs and stuff like that. So I guess it's not as fun or as much of a fuck you as misgendering them. But, you know, pointing out, you know, you know, there's the whole, oh, well, eggs are more expensive now. That shit, you know, is kind of baseline, but there's a lot of stuff coming to light now about like the 20% reduction in SNAP benefits, prescription drug costs, all kinds of stuff's coming out now. Planes falling out of the sky. Directly going after the poor wording is a good idea because, yeah, like you said, a lot of things are written by Chat GPT or hastily or just by uninformed people that don't really understand what they're writing things about. But the complaining about wokeness and trans people and then realizing that it's gone too far, I'm glad to see some people are seeing that. I haven't seen it as much. But I'm not surprised with like as ridiculous and blatant as things have gotten over the last month specifically. It's, you know, pretty hard not to see.
Well, it just goes to show that when you give reactionaries an inch, they take a mile. And that's really what it is when you're watching a special like Dave Chappelle's and you just get that feeling about it where you're just like, man, this is gross. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though people are calling me sensitive, even though people are saying I don't get it, or I'm missing the point, or, oh, Dave Chappelle, you know, is speaking for a certain community of people. And it's just like, when you cover for reactionaries, when you try to flesh out reactionary beliefs, then you own the things that happen because of it. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people out there that really fucking hate trans people, you know, were probably validated by the things that Dave Chappelle said about it. And that was something that he's acknowledged as well, that he feels like his comedy back in the Chappelle Show days was giving ammo to racists, and that was one of the reasons that he wanted to stop doing it. And it's, I don't know, it's crazy how he looped back around and kind of did the same thing again. I guess he's not alone in that in comedy, but like, it's funny that he said that so clearly back in the day, and then there's such a clear example of it happening again recently, you know, with the whole trans rights thing. And it goes to show that like when you don't empathize with other people as yourself, then you can be guilty of the same kinds of oppression. Like, in my opinion, that type of special that he made like kind of paved the way to where we're at, because it really normalized the anti-trans perspective in a way that wasn't the case before. And I'm not trying to put it all at the feet of Dave Chappelle, but I don't know, when I see where we're at now, and I remember the things that he was saying about it when he had the platform years ago, it really makes me like him a lot less.